Are you a business owner that has less than 20 employees and maybe less than $5 million? If so, you need to be paying attention to this. Maybe you have a business that has 100 employees, but you have an entity that owns your real estate that you do conduct it in and there's no employees there. That entity is going to apply. So if either of those qualify and that does apply to you, you need to be listening and paying attention to what I have to say and what's in this Corporate Transparency Act. Well, hello there. Thank you for joining us. This is John Sluice with Entrust CPA.
And I'm Lauren DeVries, and we're here today to talk about the Corporate Transparency Act.
This is the new regulation that we want to bring to your attention that no one knows about, and it's just starting to kind of percolate its way up towards the surface as far as awareness and understanding of it. And it's something that we thought very important to bring to you just because it's something that's coming down the road that's going to impact many of you. And I hesitate here a little bit because there's a lot of unknown with this. And when I say that, it means I don't even know if I'm going to be the one that's responsible for it, or if it's going to be the attorneys that are going to be responsible for it, or if it's going to be you that ultimately, as the business owner, that are responsible for it. And I'm going to define what it is later. But this is something that it has a lot of reporting requirements that are out there. And as people start really digging into this, they're realizing, wow, this is more than we thought it was. And there's going to be a fair amount of compliance and requirements that go with it. So what is it and what is this? So it is a required reporting under the Corporate Transparency Act, or the CTA. This got slipped in through recent legislation that got passed, and it didn't get passed in connection with anything financial. It got passed as an anti-terrorism and anti-defense. So it's a money laundering type of transaction here. And so that's why it's being slipped in, because no one in the financial world and the legal world is really looking at it. It's more under the Defense Act, but all of a sudden it's surfacing and percolating up, and it's effective January 1, 2024. So it's coming fast. And ultimately, what they're trying to do is to find out who's the real owner for all of these small businesses that are out there, all these LLCs, all these corporate shells that are being set up all over the place, right? You know about it, the LLC happy entities that are out there. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to figure out who owns them. And just like the attorneys and the accountants in the world who are making it more complicated and more difficult to structure for your protection and see, they're wanting to dive in and see it. So again, I want to go back to the name, Corporate Transparency Act. The government wants to know who's owns, and they're going to try to dig in all the way down to all the levels of ownership of who ultimately owns these entities.
So they're not targeting large
companies.
Businesses then.
Right, and that's unfortunate. When you look at who this impacts, it's the opposite of what you at first think. You know, most new high regulation things come out is they're looking at the bigger businesses. They're looking at the ones that are large corporations. And this is the opposite of this. In fact, if your business has more than 20 employees or more than $5 million annually in revenue, you get a pass from this. You are not required. And you're like, well, wait, that's backwards. But no, what they're trying to get to are these entities that are set up that are fake businesses, that are shams, that are structures out there. And unfortunately, this is where, in order to get those, they're having to pull in every other good business that's out there. And they're hitting, on purpose, the small businesses.
So you were talking about The Sopranos before we started
Yeah,
talking.
before we started talking, I think the best example that I can give to really describe what we're trying to get to is The Sopranos in the restaurant. You know, so if you're familiar with the movie The Sopranos, or the mafia or the mob, that's there, right? The restaurant is, the front of the restaurant is Artie. Artie owns the restaurant. So on paperwork, it's the owner, right? But we all know when you watch the movie, who really runs that? It's Tony, right? It's Tony's restaurant. It's the mob's restaurant. Well, so the government's trying to figure out, well, I want to know Tony. On paper, it's Artie. This is an entity that is structured up, so we have to go through. And I'm going to get into the details because it's not just the straight owner, and this is where the complication comes in, it's the beneficial owner. So I've spent a long time prepping this and it's to say what it really is, because it's ambiguous and it's hard, but it's this thing that's coming down the pipeline. And I say this a little bit on hesitation because we're just learning it. And it's interesting enough, I don't even know if I'm the one that's going to be the one required to do it because it doesn't dictate accountants to do it. It doesn't dictate attorneys to do it. It's ultimately the business owner that's responsible, right?
It just has to be done.
But it has to be done. And what it is reporting on who is the beneficial owner that's out there. Ultimately, the Corporate Transparency Act is that the government is trying to understand who ultimately owns a business, right? So you can look at an LLC or a corporation, and it's the legal entity's name is ABC LLC, and it's owned by LMNOP LLC, which is then owned by, you get the picture, right? It goes down to the multi-levels. And what they're trying to get to is who really owns the entity. And they want to be able to trace it on who that ultimate is the beneficial owner. And so what they're trying to do is get reporting for that. So on an annual basis, you're going to have to report address, names, birthdays, pictures. It's a lot.
And if it changes,
Yeah.
if you report something and then it changes, you have to report that change.
Correct. And that's where some of the complications are going to come into because you have 30 days to update from when something has. So now picture you're a business that has 10 different owners and the owner moves. How are you going to know that that owner moved and you have 30 days to do it? So I'm an accountant, right? That's why the relationship you have with me. I do your taxes. So why am I even bringing this to you, right? Well, the entity that is responsible for this is actually not the IRS or the Department of Treasury, it's the FinCEN. So the FinCEN stands for the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN. So on an annual basis, if you have foreign reporting, your accountant or your tax preparer files a form with FinCEN. So that's why we're being pulled in, right? And we also talk about owners, right? Well, maybe it's your attorney, because your attorney is the one that's responsible for updating your corporate records. And ultimately, it's you, right? You as the business owner are the one that's responsible. But what we're finding here is there's no real individual that's responsible, and that's why I'm bringing it to you more today than anything, just to be aware of it, because we don't know if we're going to be doing it, because it's not an annual thing. It's as it's changed. So once you do the first update with the FinCEN, you don't need to update it again, at least as of right now, until something changes. So that would feel more like it's okay, it happens with an attorney, right? When you file your articles of organization or something, right? You've set it up, you structure it, and boom, you're done. Or you change of address, like your registered agent, you're going to change. That's an attorney type thing. Now, the attorneys are saying, well, but we don't have all the records for this. That's the accountant. The accountants have the record. Or maybe it's your corporate secretary is going to be the one that's responsible. Or you as the owner, right? And the challenge is these are all names and things that I'm speaking of, which are typical for a larger corporation, right? So if I start talking about the secretary who's responsible for the stock registers and all of those, and the registered agent, yeah, that seems very corporate-y. Well, now let's go talk to the average small business owner who knows nothing of what I've just mentioned there and doesn't think about any of these. Who's going to be responsible for those? That's the concern that I bring here for you, is that specifically it's targeted at the small business who is exactly the ones that don't necessarily have the relationships. And some of you listening may not have an accountant. You may not have an attorney. You should get one of each. Or you may be doing it yourself, but you don't even know where to go. So that's the challenge of why I bring it up. At least just be aware of that is coming down the pipeline. There's an interesting fact too of, I say you have to report it. Right now, there is nowhere to report it.
They're still building it.
They're still building it. And so it's effective January 1st, 2024, but they don't have any spot to where to go or who to do or how to do it. Yes.
So no panic. At the same time, you don't have to run out and figure this out right now. It's
Right,
not even possible to do.
Not even possible to do it yet. And quite frankly, I don't even think it's going to be possible to do on January 1st, right? The legislature passed this act and said, now go do. And now they're trying to build it, and it's kind of building the airplane as it's going, right? And they're starting to see all these different issues that come with this. So, yeah. But within that said, I don't see this going away, again, because it's related to the Department of Defense. Ultimately, it's in a Defense Act, and so it's an anti-terrorism. And you show me I don't care what side of the partisan you are on, defense is going to be one that there's not going to be anyone that's going to take this up to get rid of this. And so there's where I caution that it's not going away. I also don't want to jump up and down to make this the biggest thing ever, right? So if you're a business owner and you don't move and you own you're a single member LLC, you own the business, it's straightforward, you're going to have to report it and then you're done, right? You don't have to report it until you move. Now, it is scary that all of a sudden it's just one more thing that the government is asking for, right? They're going to get your picture, they're going to get your address. And the whole point of all of these structures is to set up and to provide that security that it's not there and it's not publicly information. And I say publicly, I don't know if this is going to be public or not, but ultimately it's a government agency that could be subject to FOIA. I don't know those. But yeah, so you're going to have individuals that are not comfortable providing this. You're mandated to provide this. There are significant penalties if you don't. So again, I share this with you because I want you to hear it and to be aware of it, but it doesn't have to be a gigantically complicated thing, but it's something you need to be aware of. It does have nuances, though, that as with everything, there are instances where it's going to become difficult, right? So the example I gave earlier is just a single member LLC. It's owned by one individual. That's easy. Well, now let's talk about the partnership that's owned by 10 different people. You got to keep up with the 10 different people of where they're moving. And what if of the partners, 9 of them are fine complying, but you have one partner that says, no, I'm not doing this? How are you as an entity going to be able to hold them accountable? And how are you as an entity going to find out that they moved, right? Just imagine that if you have silent partners that are out there. So there's kind of the first layer of complications. Then now let's start getting the second layer of complications. Let's say that you have your entity owned by a trust. So now let's get back to the beneficial owner. The beneficial owner of a trust is no longer the owner of the trust, rather the beneficiaries of the trust.
Could be a child.
Could be a child. So you come to me and you say you want to structure an entity and you want it owned by my trust, and your 4 children are the beneficiaries of the trust. Well, the beneficial owner, are they the 4 children now? So now when those 4 children move, you have to keep up with them. And it spiders down. And again, I'm an accountant and I'm conservative and I'm bringing this with a whole lot of unknowns here. And so I think there's going to be a lot of clarification that comes over in the next several months, but be aware, and as you think through these, and especially if you're setting up entities that come through, as we're doing, is one more thing that you have to think about when you're setting these up, because it's just one more layer of truly bureaucracy that's going to be there, and ultimately it's hitting for the small businesses, which is too bad on that.
So new businesses will have to file.
Yeah, if after January 1st, 2024, you form a new business or new entity, you will have to file, again, we don't know where, but you'll have to file within 30 days. And
then existing businesses also have to file, but they have a longer period of time to do that.
Yes, they have until the end of the year. So it's 1/1/2025 is where the latest to report, unless there is a change.
Okay.
I want to talk a little bit here about beneficial owner. And I'm going to preface that, again, this is all very nuanced and also all very moving, right? We're still trying to interpret, and the who's the we, right? There's a lot of questions in it. But I want to introduce the concept of beneficial owner. Because it's not just the named owner on the entity. Like I alluded to earlier, think of the example of the mafia or the Sopranos, right? Now that's an extreme example, right? But there are other more realistic examples that are real world that, yes, they're going to find that mafia owner, that's the beneficial owner, but let's talk some more practical ones. Well, it's the beneficial owner is someone that can control the entity, has control or ability to manipulate the entity. Well, let's step back and think of who that could be. Your attorney who's setting up the entity has the ability to control that entity at that moment. Are they a beneficial owner? What about your controller or your COO of an organization? And again, this is a smaller entity, so maybe I won't use the word COO, but let's use the word general manager. Maybe you have 15 employees and you have a manager, so you're kind of stepped away, you're about to retire, you got a general manager. They can clearly control that entity. Are they a beneficial owner? Because they're the ones in control. So now all of a sudden, you're going to be asked to have an employee have to present this information and it attached to this entity. So there's a lot of questions that are arising out of that. And again, I'm bringing up a concept and a topic in somewhat ambiguous ways, because I don't want you to hear that your controller has to report or that your attorney has to do it, because I don't even know if they do. But it's entering in this concept and this thing that we have to be thinking about. And the point of this video here today is to just educate you a little bit and for you to at least hear the word Corporate Transparency Act and the reporting requirements that come with that. That you need to be thinking about it, you need to be talking about it. And again, not spending huge resources to do it, but at least have it on your radar.
Well, we'll put a link below to the full article, the full law. It's fun reading. As a non-accountant, I went ahead and read a good part of it, and you can fall asleep tonight.
It is great material to fall asleep to, yes, because it feels like when you're reading it goes in circles, because it's trying to get to a concept of the small business without hurting the small business that are legitimate. There's a key actually concept, right? They use the words. They want to have a legitimate business. So going back to, they've kind of deemed that if you have more than 20 employees and more than $5 million, you're a legitimate business. So they're trying to get the shells that are out there. But how do you get to the shells that are fake and are intentionally defrauding without hurting those that are not? And they don't know how. And that's the challenge with it. There's no good way. So when you read through this and you read the guidance, it is just ripe with confusion, with circles, with all of indirect ways of putting things, because they're trying to indirectly find things. So.
And the verbiage can be vague, but I think that as time goes on, they'll tighten that up and we'll have a better idea of what it's all going to look like. And
here's where I'm a little bit skeptical on this, is they made the enforcement on this, there's no phase in, right? So they'd let you know it's effective January 1st, 2024. You have until the end of the year if you haven't changed. But the penalties are not small. They're large, in the tens of thousands of dollars very quickly. And there's no ramp in, there's no forgiveness, there's none of those. And so for all these businesses out here that may not know, it's significant. Now, I can't tell you for sure. I have a feeling that they're going to give grace and they're going to try to figure things through, but we don't know that. And it's just one more thing that you have to be thinking about and be scared of, fundamentally, of they're using the stick to get this information. And the stick is a very large stick. So
financially.
Financially, yes. So thank you for joining us today. I hope you learned a little bit about the Corporate Transparency Act, or at least now have heard it and are able to know that there's something out there that you should be talking to your accountant on, your attorney on, or if you don't have either of those, that you need to be thinking about maybe looking into what it is. You're not going to become an expert. It's nothing that most of your accountants are going to even know or know where to go to yet. And I honestly am saying the same thing. I'm bringing this to you because it is new and it is something that I want you to hear about. We're going to be talking with you about it and otherwise. So thank you for joining us and look forward to talking soon.